We've all been waiting for the big award ceremony. Thank you all for coming. This is to the 2024 Southern California Horticultural Society. This is our annual award ceremony for our Horticulturist of the Year. This year we are very proud to honor Nancy Goslee Power. I'm so sorry she couldn't be here, but I know all of you know her, who wish her well, and have appreciated her work in the past. So I'm the president of the Horticulture Society, Laura Bauer, and I just am actually going to hand this right on over to our vice president, Lily Singer, and Stephen Garisher, longtime past president. But before we do that, if we could just have a show of hands of our past horticultural hotties in the room. Horticultures of the Year. We have several. Over to Lily. Oh, just one point of order. We will be doing an auction. We'll put up a slide with everybody who won pieces, and then we'll be processing your auction winnings outside just after the event ends. If anybody has a priority, you can come to the front of the line and explain it, and we will get you processed first, okay?
And if you really need help, there are a couple people that can help you to your car also. Okay, so we have 4 tributes tonight. I'm being directed. We have four tributes tonight. Oh, you want me to eat the microphone? Yeah. Okay. We have 4 tributes. It's a tiny room. We have 4 tributes tonight. In case you were wondering, we have 4 tributes tonight. How many? 4. So, hey Nancy, we miss you. We wish you were here. I just wanted to tell you that. We have 4 tributes, and I'm going to alternate reading their intros with Steve Garisher, who's over there. So the first one is Carolyn D. Bennett, CDB. Carolyn Bennett is a researcher and lecturer in garden conservation who speaks on a wide variety of garden and landscape-related issues. Among other accomplishments, while she was in London, she earned a master's degree in conservation, I had to put this in conservation of historic landscapes, parks, and gardens from the Architectural Association School of Architecture. Carolyn has served on numerous boards, including the LA County Arboretum, and has written for Garden Design and Pacific Horticulture magazines. She lives with her husband, Jamie, on an 11-acre farm in Ojai, California, where she maintains a garden consultancy business and tends to their trees and bees.
And chickens.
And chickens. I was wondering, but I didn't put it in. Okay. So Carolyn's going to come up first, and she's going to give you some thoughts, Nancy.
I'll probably need this, but I will. Hi, Nancy. It's very sad and happy. I'm very happy to be here, but it's very sad that Nancy can't be here, and I know she wishes she could. Okay, here we go. Who, in her right mind, while running a nationally recognized landscape design firm, hires a 50-plus-year-old who hadn't worked in an office in over 30 years, and whose only garden design work lay in obsessively buying plants from local nurseries, sticking them in her garden, and yanking them out when they're dying? Nancy, that's who. My family and I had just returned to California from living in London for 6 years, but I didn't return empty-handed. I came back with, as Lily mentioned, a master's degree in garden preservation. Unfortunately, I didn't have a clue how I would put it to use. Nancy did. When she bought her studio on Stanford in Santa Monica, she had always envisioned using the vacant space on the main floor as a venue for events, talks, and educational outreach. She enthusiastically handed me the opportunity to create the Barn Studio Lecture Series, and the rest is history. Having been a television producer, it came naturally to me to book these events. For several years, I had the joy of putting together garden and landscape-related talks by people outstanding in the field, sharing their adventures, knowledge, and insights. They were wonderful evenings shared by garden-loving friends. They fulfilled Nancy's passion for building community and stimulating knowledge. And they were fun. She insisted on it. Nancy Goslee Power and Associates was a family. And although I was not a trained landscape designer, she always treated me as part of a team, her team. She encouraged, supported, and mentored me as she did her whole staff. We can't always choose our families. This one chose me, and I will be forever grateful.
Thank you. Next up, we have Wade Graham. Wade Graham is a Los Angeles-based writer, historian, and landscape designer. His writing on cultural history, environment, urbanism, landscape, art, and other topics has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, The New Yorker, and Harper's, among other publications. He is the author of several significant books, including An American Eden, From Monticello to Central Park to Our Backyard, What Gardens Tell Us About Ourselves, that's Harper and Collins, 2011. Wade holds a PhD in American history from UCLA and taught urban and environmental policy at Pepperdine for many years. Since 1999, he has been a trustee of the Glen Canyon Institute, a Colorado River restoration group based in Salt Lake City, Utah. We would also like to acknowledge Wade for his efforts on behalf of Nancy and this awards dinner. He's worked closely with board member Carol Bornstein on so many levels, and without him, actually, tonight this tribute to Nancy would not be happening. Many thanks to Wade.
We'll stand aside. So these are just some photos from Nancy's books, actually, just so that we can see the work, because you gotta see the work, talking about it, it's special stuff. Anybody who's been in her gardens knows what we're talking about. They're special. They're not really in any order chronologically, so some will know some of them, we won't know some other ones. So when I first met Nancy, it was 1991, I think. I was about 24 years old, and she had her office in her house on 20th Street in Santa Monica. I'm not responsible for orientation. Anyways, these are sort of random. So her office was in a little house, a little bungalow, Spanish bungalow on 20th Street in Santa Monica, and she had made her first real garden there. She'd been working in New York City as an interior decorator. She'd married somebody who needed to move to LA. She moved to LA and couldn't really do that anymore. So she took some money and she made a garden. And it was a spectacularly successful little garden. You came in from the street and it had a hedge off from the street. It was Pisciform crassifolium as a hedge, the species, the tall one, which doesn't work very well, but it loves the beach. It had a little wooden gate and big posts, and you walked through into this spectacular little series of linked rooms. Anybody have been to the 20th Street Garden, you remember this. A little octagonal fountain, a tile floor, bougainvillea over a trellis, and then over here a little sunken garden with kind of dry, stacked masonry and a koi pool, and in the back there was a little garden with another little fountain and a tiny rill, sort of a Spanish formal thing. And what I remember being struck by in this little space was how much she put into it. Number one, just her skill with geometry was exceptional. These were little spaces, what's left over on a Santa Monica lot. And she had made a series of rooms that each one was magical and big and felt enormous. She had just the right feel for how you size things, how you use geometry and asymmetry. The other thing about it was not a lifeless exercise on paper. It was full of life. It was full of plants, crazy plants. Plants I'd never seen before, plants I haven't seen since. There were bulbs I don't know the names of. There were species gladiolas coming out of walls. There was two kinds of teucrium making the little parterres, two kinds. There were things like Bauhinia galpinii climbing this chimney that I'd never seen before. There was a cashmere cypress. Just a kind of a joy of plants that you don't see in formal layouts. People are typically, they do one thing well and not the other thing. And she did both things well. So my first thought was, wow, this is a real designer. This is somebody who understands space, how to shape space. This is also a gardener, a real gardener, a plants woman. So Nancy's garden to this day, she keeps things alive that no one can keep alive. I don't know how she does it. It looks immaculate. There's a billion things going on. She's a true plants woman. And so as I got to know her, I understood where she got her training. She didn't learn any of this in school. She came by it all honestly. Which is to say that she grew up in the eastern shore of Delaware, which is an odd spot. It's part of Delaware, but it's a little bit like the American South. Kind of very slow rhythms, very agrarian, little towns, kind of rhythms of the past. Her mother grew orchids in a little greenhouse that was attached to the kitchen, and her grandmother was a proper gardener who actually grew the food and herbs and the canned things and taught her how to get into the dirt, taught her how to be aware of seasons and flowers and so on. So she absorbed in that lifestyle a kind of, I don't know, to me it was sort of, she learned the lessons of agrarian America, kind of Thomas Jefferson's sophisticated kitchen garden agrarian America. But she really learned those lessons. The other formative influence on her was kind of an interesting one. She didn't go to four-year college, but she had the opportunity to go to Florence, Italy with 4 young Harvard undergraduates, men, who were spending their junior year there. Her job was essentially to run the household. So she would shop during the day in the farmers markets, she would make them dinner, and then at the dinner table, while she was not taking classes, they would talk about their classes. And they would talk about art history, and the museum that they went to, and the Brunelleschi, and the this and the that. Talk about the architecture, talk about history, philosophy, Italian. And the next day, she would go visit those galleries. She would look at that painting, she would make notes, she would study Italian, she would go to the Boboli, she learned everything. So she got the Harvard education abroad without actually paying for it. And what she said was, she said, that is when I became a born-again Italian. And, you know, it's a powerful thing. So what you see in her work is this coalescence, this confluence of structure and nature and life. And, you know, Nancy loves plants. She's like probably all of you, a plant freak. A plant collector. There's too much in her own garden. She's got one of everything. It's a sin. But in her gardens that she does grow people, she's quite much more limited. But she loves plants. She really, when she got to Los Angeles, didn't know anything about it, and she really tried to seek out the people who could teach her. She sat at the feet, literally, of Philip Chandler and learned what grows here, where it grows, in the shade, by the beach, under eucalyptus, on a balcony, and memorize that book. You remember this book, Reference Lists for Southern California Gardens, that you guys published in 1993. And I still use that book all the time. It's extraordinary. She handed me that book. She loved nursery people. She thought they were like, you know, sort of some cross between priests and comics. There's a long list of them. I only know a few, the ones that really struck me at that age, who I met. People like Randy Baldwin. People like John Greenlee, these kind of messiahs of the plant world. She loves plants. She does love plants. It astonishes me. She also had a really very conscious sense of the history of horticulture in this space. She was a devotee of Kate Sessions. She knew a lot about Florence Yock and Lucille Council. She went over their planting plans. She went and looked at gardens and made her own list. She was just really a student of these little things that most designers are absolutely aware of. So, you know, you want to say, well, what does it add up to? Well, it adds up to this astonishing range of work. This astonishing range. She can do everything. And the key to all of this is that Nancy is not a prisoner of her signature style. She doesn't do a style the way most of us, like, we do a garden and we sign our little name and we're prisoners of our own style. And I will say between us, architects, do it even worse. They're much more prisoners of their own style. She doesn't really have a style. What she has is this love for making a garden the right place. It's always about context, architecture, site, climate, client, budget, you know, limit of tolerance for assholes. She makes the garden that deserves to be made at that time. And the thing that where they all stand out to me is the planting. So, an incredible range of formal gardens. You're seeing some right here. The one that I would talk about the most, I think the most kind of the epitome of Nancy Power Gardens is Moraga, which is this vineyard out in the Spalding Canyon that was built, that she helped Tom and Ruth Jones build over many decades. And another person here who's worked on that project for many, many years. But it was a little crappy 50s ranch burger up a canyon in Bel Air when they bought it. And then they turned it into this sort of extraordinary Tuscan estate. And Tom Jones was, the CEO of Northrop Grumman, did time for bribery, canny fellow. He was able to buy all of the unbuildable lots around and assembled 24 acres and planted it in vines. And with LA Department of Water and Power water, makes one of the finest wines in the state of California, just in a canyon. And she made this extraordinary garden. There's quite a few pictures of it here. That's very orthogonal, it's very axial, it's absolutely an Italian garden, and it is the least stiff garden you've ever been in. It is just overflowing with gorgeousness and beauty and flowers, and it's that garden magic that she was capable of. But the thing that struck me the most, that's the plan. The thing that struck me the most when I met her, was that she was working with the most uncompromising modernists we have. She was working with Frank Gehry. The first job I did with her was his house on Washington Street in Santa Monica. It's still there. The plants we put in are still there. It's the same planting plan. I don't know how long ago that was. She had done the Schnabel house with him, which is a Brentwood house, really weird house, right? Metal and odd Saracenic kind of cupolas and strangeness. And the wife of that client had come to Frank and said, I'm really worried about this house, it's too sharp. And he said, well, talk to my friend Nancy. She went to Nancy and said, Nancy, you have to save our marriage. You have to give me essentially an English garden. She said, well, I can't give you an English garden, but let me see what I can do. So she made an olive grove and a meadow and planted palm trees, and she recreated a perennial border that she saw in Winifred Starr Dobbins' 1931 book on California gardens. So it's a black and white photograph. But she's like, those are cannas, and I bet they're red. And she recreated this, she made her own version of it, and it just saves the house, makes the house lovely and inviting. Anyway, I was struck by that. We did some weird Gehry buildings. A power company in Germany, the first plan for the Disney Hall, and then ultimately Nancy did the Norton Simon with Frank, the redo of the Norton Simon, which I think is a masterclass in how you wed modern buildings with gardens that they link to history. I mean, it's an extraordinary achievement that not that many people can do. I want to say that what Nancy's signature style really is plants. This is the kind of use of plants. It's the love of plants. And she had a great attitude about plants. She would say, yeah, those are ugly. I agree. I know you hate them. But there are no bad plants. All plants are good. It depends on how you use them. And the main things are, if you're going to use them with intention. Use a lot of them. Use huge fields of them. Then they're not ugly anymore. Do it with intention. She also was a Darwinian gardener. She would look at a place and go, well, what's working and what's not? Well, my favorite plant is dying. My unfavorite plant is thriving. We're going to use a lot more of that. We're just going to go with what works. And so her gardens are huge. They're successful. They're lush. They fit the place. Nothing is temperamental. And ultimately, I think what really marks her, for me, what I learned from her was that this is supposed to be fun. She's irreverent. She finds joy in all of it. She likes to play little tricks. She likes to do things other people don't do. She likes to do things against fashion. We just did together. We did a kind of extension of the Moraga garden. They bought the house next door and wanted to link it. And Nancy, where she got a chance, she goes in and she says, "We're going to do all hot colors. It's going to be like a rash." And without asking permission, and it's gorgeous, and it's yellows, and it's oranges, and it's reds, and it's something, nobody does this stuff. And she's just a big smile on her face. So I came here to talk about plants and Nancy Power, but that's what I learned. That all of that energy comes from she's just still a little kid in the dirt in Delaware. So.
Thanks for everything you did. And Wade has been on to Nancy. And Carol Weinstein could not be here tonight. He's very sad about that. Okay, so I'm on number 3 out of 4. All right. So Bernard is coming in via video that Alexis is hooking up right now. So, hi Nancy. Australian-born Bernard Traynor arrived in Northern California in 1995 and soon fell in love with this land. Since then, he has completed 4 academic programs, practiced professionally in 3 countries, and continues to lecture extensively on the subject of landscape design. Bernard is founding principal and design director of Ground Studio. His award-winning projects, from small gardens to extensive rural properties, have been featured in a wide range of books and publications. As a young man, he studied under famed British plantswoman and garden designer Beth Chatto. Her regionally appropriate planting designs further developed Bernard's design philosophy and subsequently the direction of his landscape designs. Bernard's work is legendary for incorporating the unique regional qualities and culture of California.
Absolutely honored to be sending a tribute to Nancy. I just think the world of her, and she's meant so much to me personally, but also professionally. She's one of the people I look up to and I've learned so much from, and she paved the path for, I know me, to do things I wouldn't have known how to do without watching the way she did it. So, congratulations on being Southern California Horticultural Society Horticulturalist of the Year 2024, Nancy. I have created a little diagram that I have in the background here. That's how I do things. I'm known for doing my diagrams, and I'll send a photograph of this. But basically, there were 7 things that came to mind about Nancy. I'm going to go through them quickly. When I think of the way Nancy goes about design and creating a garden, here's what I think of. The first one is beauty. It all starts with beauty. And the note I wrote was, give the people beauty even if they don't even know what it is or what it feels like. Give it to them anyway. Give it to everybody. Number 2 is art and design history. Nancy has a really strong foundation of art and design history. And I wrote, she considers it all. She infuses what is relevant to a particular context. And she always brings a bit or a lot of Nancy to it. Love that part. 3 is ecology and natural systems. Where are we, or where is she, is what she considers. Number 4 is cultural history. Who are we, or who am I? She brings those 2 together. Number 5 is living. People and place. Integrate them. Be with is how I think of her. When I think of every one of her gardens, they're very much helping people to be at one with place. Number 6, very important one, is risk-taking and growing. What are the possibilities? Is there room for stretching? Showing others what is possible, including me. She has shown me what is possible, and I've tried to take that further. And then, her leadership in that risk-taking is incredibly important and has paved the path for many of us to go further or expand upon some of her ideas. Then the last one, number 7, is after that's all done, have a chat, have a drink, and laugh out loud. That's what I think of Nancy. You can put those in whatever order you want, but that's how I think of Nancy. Thank you for everything, Nancy, and have a great evening, everyone.
Brian Tishner. The husband and wife team of M. Brian Tishner and Ron Thorpe have founded their namesake multidiscipline Los Angeles-based design practice in 1990. Since then, they and their staff have completed more than 400 projects nationwide. In 2017, Vendome Press published the pair's first book, Outside In, The Gardens and Houses of Tishner and Thorpe. As a joint venture partner with Nancy Goslee Power, Brian completed more than 100 gardens. Currently on the faculty of USC's School of Architecture, he is a fellow of the Garden Conservancy and actively involved with the Cultural Landscape Foundation. His exquisite renderings have been widely published and exhibited at the Cooper Hewitt Museum and prestigious venues. Brian?
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry Nancy's not here. And, when I talked to Carol about this, she asked me to talk a little bit about the very early part of Nancy's practice. And Nancy and I were joint venture partners in the late Reagan era. We had an extraordinary time just as her reputation began to lift off. She'd been in a joint venture with Tom Cox, that's a great Pasadena garden designer. And I was a young architect taking a break from a very intense stint with Charles Moore, where I was working on projects from Berlin to Singapore and Sea Ranch and Berkeley Business School. I'd studied architectural history under David Gephardt, which meant that I'd trespassed on most of the great estates in Montecito, and I'd worked on Moore's Poetics garden book, so I was more than a little obsessed with the mechanics and philosophies of garden making. I was being strongly recruited to go to Austin to work on a new Charles Moore room, which I had no desire to do. So I thought about changing gears and working with my friend Nancy on a few gardens, which would calm my life down and let me think through the relationship of architecture and gardens a little more considered way. We were a pretty good team. Well, about a month after I started, and some of you may remember this, Lily certainly will, 2 articles came out about Nancy and her work, which had an instant impact. One was in Los Angeles Times Magazine, published a very sumptuous and long feature on her house in Santa Monica. And the New York Times Magazine published the garden she did for David Easton, the great New York decorator. The two together made a very resonant statement of her vision of the garden: livable, horticulturally rich, and cognizant of history without slavish imitation. Instead of languidly pondering the possibilities of a handful of projects, we were almost instantly inundated with work of all stripes. I think we may have had north of 60 projects within a year. By the end of the second year, we were working in Australia, Napa, Charlottesville, plus a countless multitude of LA's who's near our home base. By the third year, we were designing the first version of the Disney Hall, and were being courted by a bevy of A-list designers, Gehry among them. My designs for a calmer lifestyle were certainly out the window, but it was amazing to do so much and to build so much. As an architect, you wait many years to build what you've designed. The gardens, on the other hand, a little bit faster and very hands-on, which made both Nancy and I very happy. One of the most pivotal gardens of her career that Wade just talked about a bit, the Moraga Vineyards project with Tom and Ruth Jones, was just getting into gear at this time. And we both reveled in the opportunity to work directly on land and in good Lockwood DeForest fashion, walking out the pathways, laying out the beds, refining all the details in situ. I remember drawing profiles on cardboard of a fountain basin that the farm manager would carve on his time off. It was happening. Historically, it was a period of intense change in the aesthetics of the garden. After sort of a long post-war burgeoning of a Sunset magazine-inspired suburbia in Southern California, a landscape of lawn and clivia and juniper and evergreen pear was finally giving way to a new generation of designers who would bring the early promise of landscape gardening in California into the late 20th century. The gardens of Isabel Green, Bob Fletcher, Pamela Burton, and perhaps most importantly, Chris Rossmini, were reinvigorating a vision of California which was rich and very sensibly suited to our Mediterranean climate. The idea about a palette that was rich and varied wasn't new, as all of you know. That reaches back to Francesca and Evans, but it was the basis of California ornamental horticulture. And there were amazing horticulturalists and nurserymen, as Wade was saying. The best times in that partnership, I think, were going and just hanging out with Phil Chandler for a whole afternoon, trying to figure something out, or going up and seeing Ray Sadonka at Turk Hesland or Rollo Wilhite. Those people were Nancy's mentors and her friends and the things that she enjoyed the most. And it was tremendous fun to really figure it out with them. And at her core, she was a plantswoman. She has a comfort and kind of mental agility about plants that only a true gardener could possess. And she certainly has put it to good use. In the last 15 years, I've taught a class at USC, which is essentially a history of California through the lens of the landscape. So I've had a chance to think through how Nancy fits into this long story. It's always odd to try to write a history of something you're living through. But things do stand out with Nancy, which I think contribute to her remarkable success as a world-class garden designer. She was raised in the Tidewater in a world that was very much attached to the earth, and a very different American culture than the rest of the country, one that looked back to its agrarian roots, and to England in a different, and I would suggest more sympathetic way. This gave her a rootedness and an appreciation for a way of living that was inherently gracious. She didn't go to college, but she did something more significant. She went to Italy for a couple of years, steeped herself in all of its wonders. She became the best kind of autodidact. There was nothing that she was not interested in, a voracious appetite for learning. She was a very, very accomplished interior decorator, and I think that's very important. She really understood how to do it. She learned from the best in New York City. Her color sense and decisiveness, remarkable. She was an editor of a shelter magazine. So she was relied upon to understand and deliver the best possible images of future work. This was of the utmost importance for what would become her true career. She knew what to look for to get the big hero shot. And I don't mean this with any dismissiveness. The history of the design landscape is all about memorable hero shots, whether it's Lenotre, Beaulieu-Comp, or Paragon and Salk. Nancy has the eye and the intellect to design to the shot. And I believe this gives her the vision and clarity and strength that makes her work so memorable. And most importantly, she knows how to live in the garden and to make people comfortable there. Perhaps one of the most profound loves of Nancy's life was her incandescent brother, Jimmy Goslee, a designer and event planner of epic magnitude. Those two knew how to have fun in the most stylish way possible. I see so much of the early career that I was witness to as being a kind of brilliant riffing with her brother, where they honed each other's vision of a life well lived. All of you who know her can attest to her warmth and conviviality, a true bon vivant, but brother and sister together, that was quite something. 2 weeks ago, I was at Benny Mellon's Oak Springs Garden, which is a perfect place to ruminate on this period of Nancy's career. The influence of Mrs. Mellon's work as a paragon of style and erudition was an example that Nancy respected and aspired to. The incredible curiosity, the effortless mix of tradition and modernity, the brilliant originality, and the fundamental Tidewater graciousness so on display at Oak Springs were all key attributes that Nancy brought west, and with which she forged her own California style. She had the skills and the vision to make sure we all saw the fruits of that synthesis that she forged in those days. Coming back to the question of where she fits in the narrative, I like to think about how Victoria Padilla would have described her. Probably somewhere between her portraits of Kate Sessions and Florence Yock with a dose of Lockwood and Elizabeth DeForest thrown in. Nancy was able to take all the experience of her youth and her early adulthood and bring them to bear on the making of exquisite places, informed by all the hats that she had so stylishly worn. And with the acumen to get this very fine work out to the public eye, she has undeniably influenced a generation of both designers and horticultural enthusiasts. As a coda, we went on our own paths after about 5 years. I'm pretty sure from the vantage point of 35 years later, neither one of us was quite prepared for the onslaught work that came to us in this period, and things got pretty intense. In the midst of that pulse, Nancy's beloved brother tragically died, which was a staggering blow that our partnership really never recovered from. She remains a great friend and someone who I've learned so much from, most of all, how to forge that most vital thing, a well-lived life, which of course is in the garden. Thank you.
And next up we have a short video tribute called Between Heaven and Earth.
All
on behalf of the Southern California Horticultural Society, we wanted to present this plaque for the Horticulturist of the Year 2024. In absentia for Nancy, we'll give it to Wade. You can hand it to her. And again, thank you.
All right. She will be thrilled and says hi to everybody. So, see her again soon.
And I just want to thank you all for coming, being part of this. It's really great to see so many faces together. I hope you had a good time. Again, thank you all for coming, and best wishes to Nancy. Hopefully we will see her around soon.
Thank you.
All right, slide, okay.